my name is Christina Finley, and I'm here to talk to you about 5 top tips for charities to make better use of their data without big budgets. I thought you'd probably all want to start off with why am I here, who am I, and why should you care about the top tips from me? So I'll tell you a little bit about me. I spent most of my career in fast-moving consumer goods, so in a very, very data-driven business where everyone in the organization looks at data daily and decisions are made weekly, but based on the data that we have. So starting at Nature's Path, Nature Valley, which is snack bars. I worked in Paris for Yoplait on a global basis, and then Hovis here in the UK, a very, very fast-moving business. I then went to the National Trust, taking all that kind of natural foodie thing and moving to a natural organization. I was at the National Trust as Director of Data and Analytics for 5 years, and made quite a few big transformations during that time, leading quite a large team. I moved to Nest relatively recently, about 5 months ago. And Nest, for those of you who don't know who Nest is a government-linked pension corporation. We have 10 million members, so we have quite an extraordinary amount of data. We get those members, we hold the pension for those members, but through 870,000 employers, so we have all of their data as well. We have assets under management. We hold obviously these large pensions. We hold assets under management of 16 billion pounds, and then we have 27,000 Nest connectors. Those 3 audiences are really, really important to the organization. We have really complex and interesting data. I wanted to set your expectations for what you'll hear from me today. So yes, I've said 5 top tips for getting value out of your data without spending a lot of money. It's not to say you'll never need to spend money, but what I can find, or what I've seen, is that sometimes the task seems so big that you don't know where to start. So what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today is things that have big impact, low cost, but medium effort. There has to be some kind of trade-off, so you're not going to spend money, but you will need to spend a bit of time. I'll talk to you a little bit about proving your case and getting buy-in. So when you do want the money, you know exactly what you want that money for, and that you've got people and wanting to hear what you have to say and wanting to spend budgets with you. And probably the biggest thing that there's a thin red line through everything is how to get heard. And that's one of the things that, especially what I find is working in the charity sector, in the government sector, is that sometimes it can be hard to feel like data is the thing, that feel like people want to spend money on the data because data seems complicated, and that's obviously not what any of us want to be doing. So first top tip is about aligning the vision and aims. And I know actually quite a few people have talked about this already in the last 2 days of the conference. This one, and there's a reason why we all talk about it, and it's that it is the most important thing. It is the thing that if you don't do, it all feels a little bit chaotic. So I guess what I'll say first is, like, how does this actually help you? The most important thing is that aligning your vision and aims helps people to understand why you're doing it. Why is it important? And if you all know Simon Sinek, and what he says is start with the why. Aligning your vision and aims is really about why. It's really about your purpose. So the first thing that we all know to do is to listen. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and listening is really important. Often what I find is that the listening part is where you're taking in all of the pain points, but on things that people don't recognize is data. I think this listening part, before you get to actually saying what your vision is or what you want to do, the listening part is where you start to learn people's language, and where you start to learn about how people talk about their problems, but don't actually know their problems are data problems. So listening is really, really important. And this is where you're starting to connect, and connect what you do to what they do. Because again, as I say, people often don't know that their problems are data problems. But once you've done that, you want to start acting. So in my first 100 days at Nest, which is where I've kind of most recently taken some of these top tips and put them into action, is the listing, but then immediately taking action. So very quickly, I came up with where are we going? Where is the bus going? put together some quick wins, and started to gain momentum. These things are really important in terms of how you're actually going to drive some kind of action, how you're actually going to do some things that people see that you're driving the business forward. So one of the most important things that I have found is in those listening sessions is that I started to draw pictures. And actually what I found was drawing pictures helps people to see why it's so hard and then how it can be. Left-hand side, I started to draw pictures, and this is at Nest. This is my first few days at Nest. What I started to do was draw some pictures of why data, which is at the bottom down here, why data was getting to people, but why they were getting different data, why they were getting different reports, and why it felt complicated. You can see all sorts of cross wires, just kind of getting a picture of the complexity. So when I started to draw a picture of what it would do if we had an enterprise data platform, what would happen if we had a business intelligence, one place to go for business intelligence, suddenly people started to see that, yes, actually, I can see what that would do. I can see how that would be helpful. I can see how that would suddenly help the organization to act together. So for me, one of those first things in terms of aligning vision and writing some strategic aims was actually just starting to draw some pictures and testing ideas out with people. The second big action that I can absolutely recommend is to pull together, I've called them my crew, they're my data steering group. I've pulled together, I'm a director at Nest, and I've pulled together 9 different directors across the organization to make them my data champions. I wanted to give them something really tangible to support. I wanted to talk to them all and say, actually, can we all together make decisions about data? Data is not just my remit. Data is a team sport. Data is really important for everyone in the organization. So how can we all get together and how can we all make decisions together and start to prioritize the types of things that we're doing? This is a really big thing that I would recommend for everyone. If you can, find your crew and make them your champions. I said give them something tangible support, and that's write some kind of vision. It doesn't need to be rocket science. It doesn't need to be fancy. It just needs to be clear, and it needs to be using and tying directly to the business's strategy. I think what's interesting is that I find we all want to have a business strategy document, and yes, we'll write our data strategy and we'll have 20 pages of data strategy and it will align directly to the business strategy. What I find over the course of my career is actually often not written down. Business strategy often is just the things that happen. And I'll give the example of Nest. We consider ourselves to be a customer-first organization, but we don't actually have that written down anywhere. And yet, when I went to write the data strategy, which I'll have to say, we haven't actually written the 20-page, Word document of the data strategy. All we've got is this. I knew that customers and customer data was one of the most important things. So my top tip in there is really to say, don't go looking for a document that is the business strategy, because business strategy is continually iterating. Find your way of finding that articulation of the business strategy that you can hang your hat on, that you can write some kind of strategic aims against. So for me, data enables Nest to continually learn, improve how we work, and create value so that we can deliver a better retirement for millions. And that's what Nest aims to do. We want to deliver a better retirement for millions. And the biggest part of this top tip of aligning your vision and aims is telling exec about the difference that this is going to make to the organization. So whether you're new into an organization or you've been around for a long time, you want to listen, you want to find some champions who are across the organization, who really are senior across the organization. You want to give them something to champion. You want to tell them what you're going to do and how you're going to help their business. And then now that you have their alignment, you go up to their bosses and you go up to exec and you're going to tell them about the difference that data is going to make. And the big thing, you ideally want to tell them that you're going to do some stuff without asking for money. And that genuinely will get them on board. That will genuinely say, okay, I understand that actually this can be quite expensive to do. Data is a really expensive undertaking. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of technology and all these things, but we can do some stuff without spending all that money. And by saying that, by going in and saying, look, I don't want budget right now. What I want is your attention and I want you to champion this with the organization. Suddenly you've got their attention. Suddenly you've got their buy-in to say, I want to change processes. I want to rally some people around. I want to put some data governance in. I want to do things to make our data better quality so that we can improve, and then tell them that you will be back, and you will be back to ask for money. But right now, you don't want money. In that session with Exco or exec, whatever you call your executive team, you're going to talk to them about how data can help the organization to build value, how it can create efficiencies, and how it can manage risk. The two things, creating efficiencies and managing risk, a lot of that stuff can be done without spending a lot of money. And I'll tell you a little bit about those two things, but to me, that build value, manage risk is a really, really good way to go to exec, to get their buy-in, to tell them the things that data will do for the organization. Centralize. This is top tip number 2, and you'll all kind of go, what does centralizing have to do with getting more value from your data? There are 4 things that really centralizing is going to do. The first is going to create a lot of efficiency, because what you will find is that there's everything scattered all across the organization, and you want to bring it all together. There's most likely going to be a lot of duplication. There's going to be planning is going to be really hard if you've got decentralized teams. It will help you to get much faster alignment. So what is it that I mean? I know that the idea of restructuring anything can be an agonizing decision for an organization. I really don't think that this should be an agonizing decision for an organization. Unless you have really big budgets and a lot of data work going on, it's really easy to say, you know what? The efficiency of having a centralized data and analytics team outweighs all of the risk. That centralized data and analytics team, you will create a lot of efficiency because there'll be a lot of duplication and work going on. You'll bring all your data together and ensure that there's not an Excel factory scattered throughout the organization. You will start to bring all of the reporting together. And again, you'll make sure that that's not scattered throughout the organization. Suddenly, you'll see that instead of having 3 reports for something, you only need 1. And that actually really makes a massive difference, especially for small teams. The second decision that often we agonize over, and I know this because I've agonized over this in 2 organizations, is where does data and insight sit? Is it an IT thing? Is it operations? Is it fundraising, finance, strategy, marketing? Where does data and insight sit? Again, it's to me, it's not an agonizing decision, and that's just because what you want is an exec member who's going to be your champion. That is the most important thing. So who is going to be your champion? Make sure that data and insight sits there. The second point is really who is the most neutral? Who doesn't have a say? Who doesn't have too much of a stake in what you're going to do? Because what you want to do is become a really objective function. This is really going to help you to get value out of your data because you're not going to find that your Exco member has pet projects. What you're going to find is that genuinely you're going to make the biggest efforts for the entire organization and not just for 1 or 2 directorates. So that has been an incredibly helpful thing for me in all the organizations that I've gone to. Oops. Second point is that you don't need to think about with centralizing, and once you centralize, you don't need to think about putting in massive technology. You don't yet need an enterprise data platform. You don't need to have whizzy Tableau that's quite expensive or Power BI. What you need is just one place where you put all your data. You need one place where you're going to have all of your business intelligence. And genuinely, what I can say this from experience, that place where you put your data can just be your regular corporate server. As long as you're managing and organizing it well and somebody knows where to find things. That business intelligence doesn't need to be Tableau, doesn't need to be Power BI. PowerPoint, as long as you're being really clear and you're not letting that limit you delivering insight. So while technology makes all of this easier, if budgets don't stretch to that, then there's a lot of ways that you can take that complexity and make it better, but centralization is really at the heart of that. My top tip number 3 is about insight versus reporting. And I guess a lot of the things that we kind of often say is, I guess insight is kind of a ubiquitous word. It's really a generalized word. What is insight? Who knows what insight is? What I can say, and this is not just any one organization. I've reported into EXCO members now for the last 3 organizations I've been in, and all the time, my line manager will say to me, you know what the thing is that we got a lot of data, but we just kind of glaze over it. It's really, we don't know what to do with it. We get a lot of pages of data and it takes so much time. And that's exactly what you don't want your EXCO members to do. What you want to do, instead of giving them something called reporting, that is lots and lots of pages of charts, what you want to do is to give them the insight. So what does that mean? I'm often quite clear in saying sometimes people don't know what they want. But ask them what they want. Ask them, ask them, ask them. Make sure that you're listening to them, that you hear what they say they want, but then go underneath the surface of that and give them what they need. Often people will ask for, I want this list of 20 metrics. But do they really need those 20 metrics? Probably not. How can you, as professionals, as data and insight professionals, go one step further? Often what I find is that when we ask people, what they want, what they say they want, is information. If you go further, if you give them knowledge, if you go one step further and you give them insight, they are beyond pleased. They just didn't know that that was something they could ask for. So this is one of those things that I think genuinely, probably one of the biggest differences that get value out of your data is give them insight, don't give them information. This is a template. This is a dashboard, and I'll say it's from the National Trust. It's not giving any confidential data at all. It's just a template. When people ask me what is actionable insight, and I don't understand how to make it actionable, this is what the example that I give. This is my very favorite dashboard. I don't know if we can all have a very favorite dashboard. This is my very favorite dashboard. What this does is one, it says here's a number. Here's where we're at with service. Service being a key metric for the organization. It tells you if where you compare against others, and then it tells you what drive. Here's 5 different things, 5 different levers that somebody in the organization could pull. If this service number is going up or down, we know why. This doesn't need Tableau. This doesn't need Power BI. This genuinely can just be in Excel. This template, as a format, as something that you can probably take an analysis if you run any kind of member survey or fundraising survey, this template is something you can give directly to any member of your team, any analyst, and they can start to work through. And as soon as you give this to your EXCO team, they will go, ooh, that's what I need. That's exactly what I need, because what you're giving me is 1, how are we doing? And 2, why? And that, to me, is the fundamental of insight, not reporting. Top tip number 4 is bust some myths. And this is just, I say this is a top tip. This one I find really fun. Often we can be quiet as data and insight people. We don't want to challenge too much, and yet we'll be quiet. We'll tell each other, oh, that's wrong, or they're using the wrong number. The value that busting myths does for the organization and for data is it helps you be heard. And being heard is the most important thing if you're going to get any of this stuff done. So how are you going to bust some myths? I'm going to give you, I think it's 2 examples of things that you can do. Oops. The first one, if you take some stats that you think should be aligned and you contrast them, actually suddenly you've become a mythbuster. What you can see here, 2004 versus 2017, workers who think saving in a pension is normal. And then this is, on the right-hand side, people who are actually doing it. This is phenomenal, because what you can suddenly see is that actually the problem is not actually people saving in a pension. They're doing that. The problem is the perception. Suddenly, you understand you can impact strategy. Suddenly you can say, you know what, the thing is, it's not, your marketing message isn't save more money in your pension. Your marketing message is, hey, you're already saving in a pension. Are you doing it well? Whole different thing. And that's obviously for pension organization. How can you do that differently for your organization? How can you do that contrast and start busting that myth? The second way of busting a myth is that sometimes things that might seem obvious actually can become insights that revolutionize how the organization works. There's a saying in the hospitality industry, which is, don't put a mint on the pillow if the sheets are dirty. What that's basically saying is that if your foundational things are a mess, then there's no point in putting a chocolate on the pillow or a mint on the pillow. And that's because people are going to notice the mess. There was a feeling in the organization that experience, that everyone, all visitors went to properties because of the experience that they were having, that was the most important thing. What we found out by analyzing the data, not in a fancy way, just doing a basic driver's analysis, what we found out was actually that the most important thing was that we didn't get the obvious stuff wrong. That the car park was tidy, that the toilets were clean, that everybody knew where to go, that the signage was clear. Those are the most important things. If you get those wrong, putting that mint on the pillow, having an extraordinary experience is not going to do anything for you. That was revolutionary to the organization. And it was a super simple thing. And we had to repeat it over and over and over and over again because it seemed so simple. So don't think that just because something seems obvious, that it can't revolutionize how the organization works. This kicked off a piece of work in the organization where suddenly service became the most important thing. Service became the KPI, not experience, because we knew that actually that foundational stuff, those unexpected irritants of the car park being disorganized or the toilets being a little bit messy, suddenly we knew, and this was data telling us this, at a point when we weren't really thinking too much of the data, we weren't using too much of the data, suddenly we were being heard. And that changed the reputation of the insight team. The last top tip for how you can think about how do you bust a myth is shocking the organization. That makes them curious about an audience that they should know. Then they'll pay attention to the data. We did a segmentation, and it was a new thing at the organization. We'd had a segmentation, but this was a new one, and this was a segmentation that really looked at people for who they are. There were some audiences that in the insight team we realized the organization thought it was reaching, but they weren't. And I am one of those audiences. The audience, we called them, I don't actually remember what we called them, but they're kind of urban, cosmopolitan city people. They're people that go on city breaks. They're people that probably do okay in their careers. And we thought this was an ideal target for the National Trust. The thing is that people like me, I worked for National Trust for 5 years, people like me actually don't care about old buildings. Genuinely. And so what I did in order to shock Exco, in order to shock them a little way, to say, listen to what I'm saying, this is important. This audience that you think that you're reaching, you're not. That people like me, audiences like me, I genuinely would prefer to tear down an old building and put up a modern skyscraper. That really stimulated a 2-hour conversation with Exco about our audience. So how is it you can do things like that to get people listening to the data, get people listening in the organization to insight? Because that being heard is the kickstart of a really amazing data journey. My last top tip, number 5, be patient and personalize your message. This one is hard. I'm not a patient person. When it comes down to it, I'm really, really not. I like to get things done. I like to come into an organization. I like to, in an organization, solve problems. I feel like that's why we do data, isn't it? We like to solve problems. Being patient is hard. So what I found is that I have to make sure that it's not just about me. If we want to shift how the organization uses data, if we want to shift how the organization gets value from its data, I need more people. I need some change makers, some champions. For me, that's about getting the analysts on board first. What you might find, and they might not be people that have a title called analyst. you might find in an organization there are some people who like data, who like to use data. And the thing is that you want to get them on board first with any change that you're making and let your change ripple out. Amplify your message with all these other people who you know are your champions. Get them together in a room, start talking to them, listen to them, change your message because of what they're saying. Make sure that they feel that you are their number one megaphone, that you're championing the stuff that they want, and they will go out and champion the stuff that you want. That is a really good way of getting heard and making sure that your message gets out into all corners of the organization. And then prepare yourself for 1,000 nudges. 1,000 nudges because any data journey, getting an organization that maybe doesn't really know much about data, helping an organization to understand the value that it can get from its data is genuinely not one conversation. It's not a meeting with getting a group of directors together and having a data steering group. Making the change that we're talking about is not about just getting Exco on board and feeling like it's all going to roll out from there. It's 1,000 nudges, and they can be hard, and you have to be creative. Nobody ever told me that being a data leader meant being a people person, being a creative people person. But that's really what it feels to me to be all about, is how can we start nudging people, one, to understand where we're going, get on the bus to say, here's the destination of where we're going, and then nudging them to get there, nudging them to get on board until suddenly they are helping you to drive the bus. Because the feeling is always, as you're doing this, as you're making any change, as you're getting onto a data journey, is when will the penny drop? When will I see in somebody's eyes that they get what we're doing and that they get how it will help them, that it will build value, it will create efficiencies, it will manage our risk? How can you do that? When that penny drop, and it's just be patient. And so I warn you that if you're just at the beginning of your data journey, waiting for the penny to drop can often take a long time. It's 1,000 nudges, and it's a lot of one-on-one conversations. I think that's my last slide. And that's I've talked for exactly how long I aim to talk. I think I've talked for about 28 minutes. So that leaves us with about 10 minutes for questions. I'll just kind of go through my 5 top tips one more time. Align your vision and aims. Align that with senior people. Align that with your teams. Align that with analysts. Centralize. Don't agonize over that decision. Just do it because it will be more efficient. It will be more productive, and it will make sure that you can accelerate the work that you need to do. Give the organization insight, not reporting. Don't just give them what they ask for. Take it one step further and give them some insight. Bust your myths, because that's going to help you to be heard. That's going to create a little bit of fun in the organization. That's going to give you stories that you can tell at if there's a town hall or any kind of organization-wide presentation. Busting myths can be a lot of fun. And then just be patient and make sure that you're telling your message to each person individually, and you're waiting for 1,000 nudges. I can see, Claire, that you said that's very true, constant conversations. I'm going to go over to the Q&A now because I can see that there is something in the Q&A, and I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see. In your what drives template, did you drivers based on modeling or based on theoretical connections between metric X and what drives variables? So it was based on a simple, I'm going to say a simple drivers analysis, not based on theoretical connections. We probably had a hypothesis to start, but in the end it was based on modeling and analysis. Andrew, thank you. I can see, so really useful tips. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I'll just wait and let you type some things. Oh, exhilarating. Thank you, Katie. I'll just talk a little bit while I'm waiting for you guys to type. I think genuinely one of the last things that I said was that nobody told me that being a data leader meant being a people person. Meant, you know, we are. I am an extreme introvert. And I've really dug into that through Myers-Briggs. And I've gone down and done a level 2 Myers-Briggs because I'm a talkative introvert, and that's unusual. But one of the things that we all know is that data people tend to be much more introverted, and we have to teach ourselves to get out there and to be people, and to think on our feet and talk on our feet. And so for me, that nobody told me that being a data leader meant being a people leader. I think is really important for us all to recognize. Do you have any recommendations for low budget analytics platforms? I've got to say, Excel can do a lot that you think. And Sarah, I have something in the back of my head ticking away. I know there's an open source analytics platform that somebody has just told me about that actually works in very similar ways to Alteryx. I'm going to have to look that up, Sarah. If you can contact me on LinkedIn, I'll come back to you with an answer to that, because I know that there are some that I haven't necessarily used, but I've had highly recommended. Ooh, Giselle, I just saw. How do we? That's a great question, Giselle. What she says is, in my presentation just before this, someone asked me a question. How do we influence how leadership use data rather than just what they see? We're just starting on a data literacy journey, and that data literacy journey is genuinely about getting people to not just kind of go, "Ooh, that's interesting." Everyone loves interesting things, but it's how are you going to make a decision? So the start point, actually, for doing any kind of dashboard or presentation is, what's the decision that you're going to make off the back of this? And if they can't answer what decision they're going to make off the back of it, then let's stop and not do the analysis until they can answer that question. Because that the number one, if you want it used, it's about making a decision. So that's probably my number one thing. The second is to follow up. And this is I've got a really extraordinary boss right now, so I can do this with him in a lighthearted way, which is to say, what are you going to use this for? If we're going to do this corporate report, for example, a dashboard that goes up to Exco, what are you going to do with it? You're going to read it, and how do we know that you're actually taking any action? So I can just chase him up and ping him and ping him and ping him, but again, it's a repeat, because you need to teach them how, and this is probably the wrong thing, stat that I'm going to say. Somebody told me once that in order to create a new habit, you have to do something 30 times. So I feel like I need to chase my boss 30 times to say, what are you going to do with the data? What are you going to do with this dashboard if I do it? How did you make a decision today? I don't know if that answers the question, Giselle, but there we go. You talked about a centralized data team. My org are reluctant to make my whole role about data, but without that change, I can't do more. Is it sensible to upskill the whole team in doing analysis? Ooh, that's a hard question. So number one, centralizing the data team doesn't mean your whole role has to be about data. And that's one thing that I can say. At National Trust, my whole role was not about data. I had the I'm going to call them the data marketing. I had the customer journey team as well. So my whole role wasn't about data, but centralizing the data team and centralizing the analytics team was something that we decided was really important and was going to be really productive. I think it's always sensible to upskill everyone in doing analysis, doing some form of analysis, but it's not everybody has the, aptitude is the wrong word, not everybody has the intuition to make that easy. What we want in organizations is for people to be able to self-serve, but I think so often, rather than teaching everyone how to do analysis, I think that people who do analysis have to come halfway, and we have to teach some people to read more data, not necessarily do analysis, and some people to do better analysis that leads to better conclusions and get them to insight. I don't know if that answered your question, Anonymous. Hopefully it did. How can this all be applied to a small organization? I mean, they might all sound like big things. They're not. They can be very, very small things. Aligning Exco is an easy thing. Centralizing really just means that there's one person who does all of the data and all of the reporting. It depends on when you talk about a small organization. None of these things, I don't have a large team at Nest right now. We outsource everything. A small organization is really just about scale and really about looking across the organization saying, what are the most important things? Let's tackle those things. Because you're in a small organization, your time is the most important thing. Sorry, I'm just looking through to see if there are any other questions. Oh, Melinda, I see your name now. Sorry, I didn't mention your name. I'd love to know if anyone has any other thoughts about applying this to a small organization, or if anyone can type in questions or chat to say, ooh, I work for a small organization. This is what I think I would do. Because I can see that we have 4 more minutes, and I can't see any more questions coming up. Oh, Giselle, thank you again. Has anyone found similar or different approaches that work for them? I would be really curious about that as well. This is just from my experience, but I know that everyone has different types of experiences and can probably has lots to add. Ooh, I just saw somebody say, I'm told there's no data to support the Myers-Briggs analysis. Richard, you're probably right. It's just common sense. It feels right to me. Thank you, Claire. Separating out reporting from insight might be a light bulb moment for me. Funders have a role in this too, as they drive use of data for reporting rather than insights. That is absolutely true. I absolutely that people who are donating money genuinely, especially large organizations, are not helping us always. Becky, we're a small organization, and this talk's been really interesting. We talk about data a lot, but producing reports always falls to me. Yeah. I think it's going to be really important to always highlight the insights which will drive buy-in. That's great. Amanda, I work for a small organization. I think of the top tips, it's worth separating out what you would want to do in an ideal world and what you're planning to do right now. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. We all need to repeat that so much. We were in a session yesterday afternoon, and something like that came up as well, is that don't try to be perfect, because you will never get it done. Just put something out there and let that be a start, and everyone will feed back. At DataCon UK, we get a lot of questions about how to progress into senior roles, with people saying that senior roles are often policy people rather than technical people. Thoughts? I agree. I'm just thinking about that. Here's an example of an introvert thinking on her feet. Now that is really interesting, because the thing is that what I find is that technical people are brilliant at the technical things, and it doesn't always make them brilliant people leaders. And in the end, it depends on the organization. In the end, especially in small organizations and charities, the senior people need to be more generalists and need to be doing quite a few different things. And I think that technical people, if you're going to have a senior leader who is IT and data, that I can see, but having somebody who is just data and senior in a charitable organization might be a lot to ask. So yes, I can see the policy people, and I can see why. I don't know if we can get past that. I don't know if that was helpful. How can we do this with little data expertise in the organization? Helen, don't let that stop you. Don't let little data expertise in the organization stop you. Ask for help. And this is one of the things what I would say, this is where Data4Good and DataKind are absolutely brilliant, is there's so many people who would love to help. There's so many people, so many organizations who would love to give you and donate a little bit of their expertise. Even if it's just a conversation, Helen, I'm happy to have a conversation and just to talk you through and give you a little bit of here are some 3 things that I could see that you could do with your organization. Really happy to do that, but I know there's lots of other people. And Giselle, if you're here, you might I would say correct me or champion what I'm saying is I think that there's lots of people who can help ensure that you can be mentored and building your data expertise. So now I can see that I've run over. And so I apologize. I can see there's still 50 people in the room. Oh, there we go. Yes, thanks, Giselle. Thanks. So Helen, DataKind UK is gonna help set you up. Thank you very much. Thank you for your comment to say yes, we are done. Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for listening and for participating in the chat. I really appreciate your time.